Afternoon. I want to tell you a story, a related story that WTOP, our local news affiliate here in the Washington, D.C. area, has brought forward. A man got 165 years for sustained sexual abuse, not only of his own daughter, but of her friends. And I'll share this article with you because it's extremely instructive as to where the nature of sexual abuse really is to be found. We hear it all the time online. We have heard programs like Stranger Danger. You have groups like Thorn and Rain and Alicia's Project and a whole host of others who have, cut their teeth on and have their bread and butter by the scary sex offenders online. And again, I would never say that there are not vehicles online which people use to abuse others, but by far, most of the abuse occurs study after study after study among people who know one another, who have positions of trust, who have other situations where they feel trapped in some way. And so I want to talk about the three, right? You hear on this channel a lot my talking about the proactive stings. I won't even talk about the reactive stings. And let me take a moment to explain the two. A proactive sting is where the police claim that they go on a dating or social media site and they just sit there and they wait for something to happen. Of course, we know over and over again, they don't just sit there and wait for something to happen. They create the circumstances of the something happening, which calls into question the legitimacy of what they're doing and whether who they're targeting is really the predator or the pedophile that some of you nitwits who come on my site and attack me think. Okay? If they just sat there like they do at the corner here on the bottom of the hill, then you'd see the speeders, right? They don't rig your car to speed, right? And as I've said before, they don't throw tacks out or onto the highway to so you get into an accident so they can give you a ticket. They just sit and wait and watch. Now, that would be intrusive enough if they did that on a social media platform, but at least it would be honest. Okay. So they get a lot of people through that because it's easy, because they create the circumstances in which something happens, right? You don't know that they're laying a trap for you when you think you're talking to an adult person and they do a switcheroo later on. And I've talked about how that goes, and people argue with me, and they do not know and they do no research, but they're just sure that we're wrong. They're sure I'm implicated, all this other stuff. Okay. The second one, though, is where they police do a deep dive on the deep and dark web, what I might call a deep sting, and there they infiltrate a group or they infiltrate a child sex trafficking group, the horror that is, and that takes time and resources and energy to do something like that, and it doesn't seem to produce the results in the same way that the proactive stings do with a short turnaround, but certainly takes a much longer time to plan and orchestrate. And then you have the ones that are hardest to gather sometimes, but the ones that are much more prevalent according to the research, and that is the um, homegrown ones. I hate to use that word. Forgive me if I've offended anyone. I don't mean to. But these are the true reactive ones that occur not at the guy in the mall, not the guy in the metro platform, not the guy who, is on the plane or next to you on the train and puts his hand on your leg or up your skirt. I'm talking about the homegrown in the family, your uncle, your father, your mother, your guardian, your foster parent, your coach, your teacher, your scoutmaster, pastor. It could be anybody in that position of trust. So you have those three: the proactive stings, the deep dive on the deep and dark web that take time and energy put together, and these homegrown ones where you have people around you with positions of trust. And the ones that get the most attention are the proactive stings. They give the most bang for the buck. I've heard police talk about it, okay? And these are the ones that you most often hear about. And if they get 10 or 20 or 30, you know, you take somebody like Grady Judd down in Polk County, Florida, Central Florida, around Lakeland. All right. They love doing those. They trot all these people out, but they rarely do one of those big press returns where they're standing in front of everybody and they're talking about the onesies and twosies. This one person who abused all these people. No, no, they have the whole big sting there, right? So why do I mention this? Because I'm going to show you something here that is truly something. So this guy gets 165 years. This is where the majority of the problem is, according to researchers. This is where even the trolls and I will talk about how it's incredible that the people, I guess I've been blocked here. Let me see if I can take this down. All right, here we go. It's up. This is where you have the trolls and others coming out and agreeing with all of us that there are things that are unreported. Yeah, but they're not as unreported in areas online as they are in areas here. Okay? This is where we know things are unreported because here's what happens years later. Victims come forward finally, and say that the man that they were forced to share a home with, who used to go to their games and their school functions, was also sexually abusing them. It's a 60-year-old man, and now 60, and for the better part of 30 years, he was abusing these people who are now young women who were children at the time. Second degree child abuse, rape, sex offenses that came out earlier this year tied to sex abuse spanning a long time. He was held accountable. Sexual assault is deeply personal. Yeah, yes, finally held accountable. But you have many cases where you don't have that. After 25 years, I decided to take my abuser to court because, unlike the so called stings where the police create it, unlike where you go in the deep dark web where the victims don't necessarily know who their traffickers are before they encounter them, they don't necessarily know where they are or what's going on. Sometimes they're drugged up. These people in the local homegrown ones, they know they're abusers. They are not drugged up necessarily. They lead or appear to lead perfectly normal lives. And the abuse and the hurt and the confusion continues on until much later where they want to face that. As this one victim says, when her accuser was sentenced, it feels like I'm dreaming. I'm still shaking. It just feels like a dream that I'm living. It's amazing, amazing. I feel so free. That horrible burden sitting on their chest, making them feel horrible about it, is gone. And I'm so happy about this. And listen to this. Very often they report the abuse too at the homegrown level in the family or in a trust relationship, and they are ignored. We have seen that over and over again. So when they say, well, it's never reported, you'll hear people say, well, most of it's never reported. What they don't say is much of it is reported but ignored. This is where we have the reactive stings. Police are getting these reports sometimes, and they're not acting on them. People who are supposed to be in a protective stance over children get the reports, but because they are compromised, because the person in the household is the breadwinner, or somebody who can hurt them, or somebody they're physically, mentally, emotionally, or psychologically or financially dependent upon them, they do not act in the best interest of their kids. And so this perpetrator is in this fiefdom, basically, where he controls or she controls everything that's going on. Here we go. Me and my cousin Brittany, we actually told our parents at age 13. We told them and nothing changed. Mr. Canton, that's the sentence, the perpetrator, was still living in the home with Brittany. Again, I was in Atlanta, but when we would come to family events, he was still there. He was dating the mother, they say up above. Okay. See, Sim said the abuse took place while her mother was in a relationship with Canton. This is very, very common among women. They're in a relationship with the perpetrator. It's providing benefits to them, and they turn a blind eye to what the children say. And this great advice, please, please, please speak up. If you're going through anything that's heavy on you, feel nobody's going to listen, the team is there, they're going to get justice. People need to speak out. But I point this out again, folks, because this is where the problems are. This is the primary place where the problems are. But where did we put most of the efforts? The police put it in the proactive stings. Most of their efforts are in the proactive stings. They talk about reactive stings. They talk about reactive stings are where they get a tip. They talk about it, but they very often will not follow it up. And very often we have seen over and over again when faced with a proactive sting where they can get a lot more bang for their buck versus a reactive sting, which is time consuming. They have to do investigation. A lot of times people don't come forward. A lot of times people recant their stories. That's harder, and they don't spend as much time on that. So where should we be putting our efforts? No, what are people doing? Vigilantes and others are doing the online stuff because that's a murky little world. It makes them look like they're heroes, especially if they can implicate somebody who's already been accused and already been sentenced under something. And I'm speaking not only about me, but about others. But these other two types of stings are much harder. They're in darker territory. It's much more time consuming. It's much more painstaking, and it doesn't breed as much, forgive the verb, for somebody to get in the government, somebody in the government to get more of the, I hate to say bang for the buck. All right. They get much more out of that. But hopefully this is instructive as to where we need to spend our time in the future.